This sitting is resumed. Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me at the outset apologize for my voice. I've been fighting a chest infection, but nevertheless, I believe that I will have it still in me to communicate with the good people of this land. And in that context, let me start this evening by saying simply how very, 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 very proud I was of the delivery of the budget by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central. Mr. Speaker, delivering a budget is not an easy task. I think I can say a few things about it now, having had to do 6 on my own, and having had to do a number of responses to the budget as well in this Parliament. And I came up in the tradition that I would like to believe that most of us will want to stick to in this honourable chamber, where we treated this as a noble and very serious exercise. The Honourable Member for St. Peter, who equally spoke exceptionally well today, reminded us of the late Sir Richard Haynes. And those of us of my generation would recall debates between the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, the Honourable JMGM Tom Adams, and indeed in subsequent years, Sir Richard, and of course, the late Honourable Member for St. Peter, the Right Honourable Owen Seymour Arthur, who delivered more budgets than any other Member of Parliament in modern Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, the exercise of delivering a budget really is first and foremost to speak to how monies will be allocated and spent, or how monies would be raised in this honourable Parliament. And therefore it has context. It's not a State of the Union address, but we've taken the opportunity to be able to address other things. But in so addressing other things, sir, we've also taken the time to always make connection with the numbers and the programs in the budget. Mr. Speaker, we were treated for just over 10 hours to an exercise that took us from Earth to Saturn to Jupiter to Mars, and even tried to descend on Pluto, which is no longer a planet. But at no stage was there connection with the budget delivered by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central. He stayed far and wide. And while, sir, he accuses me of traveling the globe, he traveled the stratosphere. And Mr. Speaker, I'll come to that issue of travel today too, because this is a government that is determined to cut the contrast between what the country became accustomed to under the leadership of the last Prime Minister and what we determine to be minimum standards for this government. And I have said all along, sir, this government is not omnipotent, it is not omniscient, it doesn't know everything. But Mr. Speaker, we come to work every day to do our best by the people of this nation. And we do so, sir, conscious that the mandate which was reposed in us has been a serious mandate. One, Mr. Speaker, that we don't take lightly. And perhaps, sir, if the Honourable Member who sits opposite was speaking from the perspective of a mandate, he might have spoken differently. But the mandate which he seeks to hold on to, even if in tattered form, is one that was delivered by a different party from which he leads today. And a member is entitled to do anything and to stand anywhere. But what he must never do is to pretend that something exists that does not exist. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am constrained at the outset of this speech to issue a disclaimer. And I ask your permission so to do, sir. Up front and center, I have been accused of being responsible for sending 2 members of the Barbados Labour Party to lead the Democratic Labour Party in George Street, to infiltrate the leadership. I want, sir, to publicly disavow now any such action on my part. And to tell you that if I had done so, an act which has been described by a leading political scientist as a dishonest solution to the leadership of the Democratic Labour Party, and that political scientist will have to explain why he believes that this is the case with these 2 members. But I want to tell you that if I were to do so, I would have to be guilty of the most reprehensible act. And I don't know how to be that way. And if there was any doubt in the minds of anyone as to why and how I could never do it, they would understand today, after 10 hours of a rambling concoction, that presentation unacceptable for a leader. They would understand that I would have to be wicked to do it. But you see, if you stood on the other side and you were a strong supporter of the Democratic Labour Party, you may really well believe today that I did send him to George Street. Because what paraded yesterday and today was a poor excuse for leadership and a clear intent to take the Democratic Labour Party that he has already decimated by 2/3 and now to want to leave it on the dump heaps of history. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will not tarry other than to say 1 or 2 quick things. There is a word called quidnunc. I'm not sure how many members on this side know it. I know the honourable member who praises himself for being a literary scholar must know what quidnunc means. Quidnunc. And I'm sure that the former leader of the Democratic Labour Party, who he aspires to be like, in fact, I'm told when he walked around in Swan Street today, a little youngster asked him if he was from Del Stewart, that he looked like him. That's not me. But quidnunc, for those who like to pride themselves on intellectual snobbery as they do, simply means a gossip. And we were given 10 hours of a bit of this and a bit of that, and I hear this and I hear that, and throw this and throw that, and innuendo. Mr. Speaker, if I did not know better, I would have now to pardon myself with my members here, because they don't like the word quidnunc, I'm sure. They would understand if I called them a pearly, a political pearly, a gossiper. And Mr. Speaker, I am going to come to one or two things because it was intended to solicit and titillate. And what do I mean, sir? Let me deal with one of them up front and center. Because this government has been very, very clear that we have not come to office to hide anything. We may not be perfect, but we are also not going to put against our record any attempt to hide. My members will tell you straight that I tell them all the time that Bill Clinton was not impeached for trying to have sex. Bill Clinton was impeached for lying. And that under no circumstances must that be part and parcel of our record. Indeed, sir, a friend reminded me before coming in here of 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2. Rather, we have renounced secret and shameful ways. We do not use deception, nor do we distort the word of God. On the contrary, by setting forth the truth plainly, we commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God. You're not like the honourable member who recites word alone. And why do I say so? Late last night you heard that this government was paying someone $1 million for the year. As if we were doing something nefarious, thieving, and dishonest. Mr. Speaker, sir, to begin with, the numbers were wrong, but I'm not going to quibble on that. What the Honourable Leader of the Opposition was referring to was the engagement by this government of a person who previously worked for the OECD for 15 years as the head of the tax division. This honourable chamber has heard me say over and over that we are in danger if we did not remove ourselves from the grey list and the black list of having companies leave this country because those companies, insurance companies and others, for example, working in Europe, would not be able to do business there anymore if Barbados continued on these lists. Mr. Speaker, we took a decision early on to be able to move away from that kind of lurching from side to side and corner to corner with respect to our activities in Europe. We were also facing, sir, after the election of President Biden, a world that was committed to implement the global minimum tax, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. And in October of 2023, we started a process engaged with him that led to corporate tax reform on our part. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, we asked the same gentleman to work, and his crew team to work with international business and to revise our tax treaties. Barbados depends on a network of double taxation treaties, the avoidance of double taxation treaties to be more precise, and bilateral investment treaties. And there were changes that were absolutely necessary for us to have a credible platform for expansion of our tax treaty network. We asked, Mr. Speaker, for him to also work, as he is doing now, on repositioning us with our insurance and our funds industry to make sure that we remain competitive. We asked him, as I said, to work with corporate taxation, which meant working with the Barbados Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, the notion of persons working with us goes back to the days of the 1980s when a gentleman called Mr. Bruce Zagaris worked with us from government, both sides of the aisle, over and over. And Mr. Jeffrey Bell, who worked with the Central Bank of Barbados and was responsible for all of our engagements in the market across governments yet again. And Mr. Speaker, their briefs and costs would have been internationally competitive as this one was. In fact, the reality is that the only reason the Leader of the Opposition knows about this is because we did not hide and do it. It is available, sir, on the Bonfire platform, which is the platform that has been introduced by the new public procurement legislation passed by this government, making it absolutely clear that what we do and with whom we contract is completely openly available to the entire public. But Mr. Speaker, I am not coming in here to ask you to walk by faith and not by sight, because that contract also allowed us to terminate another contract in Brussels, because the same entity, the same gentleman, now works with the ambassador at Brussels in the European Union. So he's working with BRA, he's working with Invest Barbados, he's working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he's working with the Ministry of International Business, which is now the Ministry of Commerce. And Mr. Speaker, he is also working with the Barbados Defense Force, seeking to find financing at concessional rates for the repurchase, for the renewal of its Coast Guard fleet at concessional rates. Now, what would you believe? The company that worked for us in Brussels before was getting a loan for the simple job of Brussels alone, 15,000 euros a month as a retainer, and then to be paid anything on top of that. This gentleman, sir, with the company called SAGA, S-A-G-A, Santa Mar Global Advisory Services, who, by the way, is now the advisor to the G20 South African Minister of Finance in this year of our Lord as we speak. His contract is 70,000 US a month. Now, that 70,000 US should remind some people in here of 140,000 Barbados dollars. And it was the same Leader of the Opposition who sought to charge somebody that we know well, $140,000 for one case. And if you can charge $140,000 for one case that has nothing else to do and certainly ain't gonna last for a month, 41? Oh, so I'm so sorry. 141,000. That can't last a month, but would come in here to complain and to make it sound like scandal for a government to hire a distinguished global citizen who headed up the tax, worked with successive governments in Barbados, believed in the honor of this country. But you know what is the proof of the pudding, sir? I'm gonna make it available to you. What did I say was his first job? To advise us on what? Corporation taxes. And Mr. Speaker, what are the facts? Last year, at the end of February, the government of Barbados had collected net corporation taxes of $349.8 million, pursuant to the reforms that he has worked with us on. Would you like me to tell you, sir, what the net corporation taxes in this country are tonight at the end of February? Mr. Speaker, would you believe that it is a whopping $837.5 million? Mr. Speaker, one person now to be made a victim of innuendo, 10 telling members of cabinet, bet you all don't know about it. And whose actions, along with those in the Ministry of Finance and the Barbados Revenue Authority, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central will tell you that he has been central not just to our decisions on revenue, but all of the conversations in the Joint Economic Group, and has been responsible in helping us to secure for the country almost $400 million more at the end of February. And we expect this number of 837.5 to increase somewhere along the way to over 900 million by the end of this month. Mr. Speaker, this is the kind of foolishness. And when I say that we need to cut the contrast, and I don't mean to be invidious or to get personal, but I have to make a point, because young people in this country must learn and know better. I can only expect that he's not in here since he spoke, because he spent over an hour and a half complaining about the fact that members held him to account. But he is to hold people to account for 10 hours and flee. I don't know what other animal flees. I don't know what animal gnaws at the end, at the edges, gnaws.
Nor will we nod it.
But Mr. Speaker, the reality is that I was ashamed as a Bajan when, in the course of the estimates debate in the Well, when the Ministry of Housing was here, the member for St. George South brought his team, and the chairman of Hope, who was here, and what was he regaled to? Who is he? And the kind of discourtesy that should never be associated with a member of parliament in this chamber. And Mr. Chairman, for what? Mr. Speaker, for what? Because he's a non-Barbadian? Mr. Speaker, the wife of the leader of the opposition works as a judge in a Northern Caribbean country. And I would hate to believe that anybody would want to treat her with the disrespect with which he has treated people in this honourable chamber. It is wrong. But yet he will want to quote the Bible, quote Shakespeare, be sanctimonious, tell us about moral decay, but forgets that discourtesy and disrespect cannot live in the same house with sanctimonious behavior.
That's right.
Mr. Speaker, it is wrong. And what we have therefore been presented in here was a full theatrical performance. I can't say it's a madman. You can say so if you want. But a full theatrical performance, in the words of the same Shakespeare that he loves, full of fury and signifying nothing. Sir, some people met me on my way here in the Parliament yard just now and asked me, but wait, he talked for 10 hours and you ain't said nothing. How you do that? That you work for 10 hours and you got nothing to show for it at the end of the day? Sir, he berated and talked about the member for Christchurch East Central talking to the Deputy Prime Minister about a road in his constituency. You mean to tell me that he couldn't even ask for a few roads while he was talking for the 10 hours? You mean to tell me, sir, that the 10 hours couldn't relate to the condition of Bajan people, but the majority of it was to be able to show how wicked this government is, how corrupt this government is, how uncaring this government is? Mr. Speaker, that is his opinion. And I welcome him to keep it, but I know for sure, sir, that while he revels in theatrics, this government will continue to do the people's work. And Mr. Speaker, let me therefore come on to a few things that are absolutely critical. I took a decision this year, sir, to allow the member for Christchurch East Central to deliver the budget. The member for Christchurch East Central has worked alongside me for the last almost 7 years. I believe then, when I took the decision as I do now, that he was the right person to do the job, that he had done all the heavy lifting, and that the confidence that I had in him and some of his colleagues, all of his colleagues who have it in him, had now to be shown why we repose our confidence in the member. And I think that I can say that the average Barbadian out there recognizes that this is not a one-woman government, that this is a government with depth, with capacity. And you heard during the 3-hour presentation or so, 3.5 hours, the Honourable Member take us through a very cogent presentation, premised on resilience, premised on growth measures, premised on revenue efficiency, and premised on cost of living and wellness measures. Mr. Speaker, it was balanced. And we've done it largely because, sir, we are in a position where the country has done well. You heard him say the central bank will report 15 quarters of straight growth in this country. Unemployment that is so low that the only number that we have ever gone lower was at the end of December 2007 under the then member for St. Peter, when it went to 6.7%. Debt, and he was very brutal and clear in showing you that contrary to those who only tell you about this government borrowing, that every year we have not only borrowed, we have paid back, and in total we have paid back more money than we have borrowed, and that does not include the restructured debt. Mr. Speaker, you know it and I know it. Every month you just pay back debt and borrow some too. Every few months you will go and say, I need a little line of credit with the credit union. But that don't stop you from paying down your mortgage. That don't stop you from paying back the car loan. This is real life. But when you have nothing else to hold on to, these things take on a size that is far greater than anything that we have. Sir, I want to commend to Barbadians the major change that we are making in the affairs of this country with the Resilience and Regeneration Fund. The Right Honourable Owen Arthur created the Catastrophe Fund, correctly so. But we recognize that it is now time to change that into a Resilience and Regeneration Fund. And we recognize that the sources of its funding must be secure for future Barbadians. Sir, if we get hit really bad by a hurricane or some other kind of major system, we have the natural disaster clauses that will unlock almost 20% of GDP, more than $2.5 billion over 2 years for us to step in and do what we have to do. But in the interim, when it isn't that large, as we had with Tropical Storm Kirk, as we had with Hurricane Elsa and Hurricane Beryl and the freak storm, we need to use this fund to be able to help us repair the houses, whether in St. Philip, whether in Christchurch, whether in St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. Michael, St. Thomas, as we have been doing. And sir, the systems are not perfect because we're dealing with men and women. But we have tried to make sure that as far as possible, we have brought relief to those who were victims and who had no insurance. Now we know, sir, that we can't keep doing that out of the consolidated fund. And all that this tries to do is to say, a little with content is great gain. A person earning $2,000 a month will pay the equivalent of $5 a month. $5. Sir, less than most things. When you go in a shop now, you'll be looking to see what you can get with a $5 bill in truth. You might or might not get. I'm not advising people to buy 2 chocolates. But a bag of rice. Ensure, I want to advise people on the deputies. But the point is this, sir, that for $5, And what he has done in this budget is say, look, it shouldn't only be for people below the NIS maximum insurable earnings, that if you are earning $20,000, you should pay the equivalent of $50 a month. But $50 a month can't break nobody earning $10,000 a month. $20,000 a month, sorry. And what we have equally said is that employers should match it. Now I've heard that some people say that the employers have said that this will lead to a cost through to consumers, and prices will go up again. Sir, it is not meant to pass through to anybody. If everybody don't leave a little on the table, you're going to pay for it when your time comes. And we learned it in COVID. People who thought that they would be good, all of a sudden had no revenue. And let us go further, sir. The government hasn't said to employers, do it and we can watch you. We have said we will take 1/4% of GDP in this country and put it in the fund each and every year. Because we know what world we are living in. And we are therefore leading from in front. And what we have done is to move on what we have been arguing with the Bridgetown Initiative across the world. And thank God we have the example now of Germany to be able to make our point. Germany is facing a potential existential crisis because of its lack of access to defense under NATO, with the US doing what it is doing to Germany. And Germany now has to go and spend money on defense in a way that it has not spent for the last 80 years. Germany has said, we are going to spend this money on defense and don't mind what the fiscal rules, because Germany was the one who was the biggest one on applying the rules for fiscal rectitude in Europe. And they have said, don't mind what the fiscal rules say, we are going to put aside money every year in order to be able to defend ourselves. Well, what defense is to Germany, as the Honourable Minister said, is what climate is to us. And therefore, sir, I know that as leader of this country, I am doing something that will benefit Barbadians 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years from now. And that it will not be the subject of the crowding out of the things that we must do for ordinary Bajans, because it will affect our numbers. We have said, leave it outside whatever else we do and put it there as the first claim on the government's expenditure every single year, because Barbados cannot survive if we end up ravaged by hurricanes, not by the large ones alone, but by the small ones that are niggling at us. Mr. Speaker, that resilience, therefore, is critical. We spoke, and others spoke in here, about cybersecurity resilience. The member for St. Michael South Central just spoke on it. Member for Christchurch East Central spoke on it. We live in a world that people have to be aware that these things are going to happen. And therefore we have to build up, and the cost of building up the protection that we need for our country is not cheap. It's not going to be cheap. We've asked for social resilience. You saw the measures that we took to give those who are vulnerable, the most vulnerable, disabled among us. And what the member did was to come in here and correct it and make it retroactive to October 2024, so that the children who are blind, who are mute, who are deaf, can also draw the contributions from the NIS, draw the allowances from the NIS, in the same way that we have made available to those who are autistic or suffering from multiple sclerosis, or indeed those who are adults who are suffering from, who are being mute or blind or deaf. Mr. Speaker, the resilience for water. The people in St. Lucie and St. Peter, and the member for St. Peter is correct. The people of Six Mens draw their water from the Allendale Reservoir as well. And they too are included in the 3,700 persons whom the government is prepared to accept responsibility for the 12 months while we build out new mains to deal with the rusty water from the rusty mains. And while we fix also the continued issues at the Allendale Reservoir. Mr. Speaker, this budget was intended, therefore, to build the resilience so that when things come at us left, right, up, down, we're in a position to bob and weave and survive and stand strong. Because if you get thrown down, how are you going to carry on? Mr. Speaker, not a word about that from the Honourable Member for Christchurch South. And even in terms of the fishermen, if we don't build resilience for them, and this is a government that has given them, in spite of no insurance for most of them, a 25% grant, and making available also loan funds if they need it, creating and putting in place business interruption benefits. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that not only cares, that acts as if it cares. We don't pretend. And Mr. Speaker, all of these things are available on public record. But you know what's wrong with the member for Christchurch South? He does not know government. He don't know the estimates. He don't know that. He started in here for years. Refused to learn every March before the estimates. I carried the parliamentary party, and this year the member for Christchurch Essential did it. And carried people through how do you read the estimates. When he wants to know about how much my travel is, but you can only spend what you got, and you can only take it from operating expenses, so that at the very least you know what the outer limit is. But he doesn't have to do that, because I've come in here to make everything totally available to the people of this country. We don't hide. I told you, go back to Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2. No, Mr. Speaker. But let me return to the budget. We recognize that we needed also to continue to tweak growth. Mr. Speaker, across every community in this country, a country that prides itself on the delivery of hospitality, is people cooking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And long are the days where tourists only went in established restaurants. Tourists go into communities in this country now. And this government looked at the revenue, looked at what the opportunities would be for persons who need to upskill and lift their game, and to be able to use commercial industrial equipment so that they can turn around people quicker in their establishment. And Mr. Speaker, we have said that the same way we will treat the hotels, we're going to treat to you as small business people in this country. Because we see you as small business people, and we understand that if growth is to be inclusive, it can't only be at the macro level, it has to permeate down to the communities where people are. Mr. Speaker, we didn't only do it for this, we've done it for the small farmers. We've said, look, we know that a lot of people who are interested in poultry farming and who are interested in more vegetable farming to become climate resilient. Because we've seen in the last few years how difficult it is for persons to survive the drought and then the extraordinary rain and the pests that come with it and the decline in yields. And we've said, look, we're going to try something. And we're going to let the Barbados Agricultural Development Marketing Corporation, BADMC, access the funds from the Agricultural Development Fund. We're going to go public and invite proposals from persons, and we're going to choose 20 people for the poultry farms with the climate resilient tunnels that are needed for the poultry, and we're going to choose 20 for the climate resilient containers, vertical agriculture. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that sees people and is trying to lift them from where they are to the next level where they can literally pay forward for other people. This is not me coming in here. I could come in here and tell you about George Street or who don't belong to George Street no more, who wasn't out there to greet him no more. But where does that leave you, sir? Where does that put money in the pockets of those who are suffering in this country, or those who want to move to the next level, or those who want to be competitive in exports? At each level, we have to move people to the next level. And that is what this government is about. How do we move people to the next level, regardless of wherever they are? Mr. Speaker, we did the same thing for the restaurants. Restaurants were complaining that hotels with restaurants have a competitive advantage by having duty-free access for alcohol. duty-free access for proteins. And Mr. Speaker, we have removed that disparity in this budget so long as those persons earn more than 60% of their income in foreign exchange. And we've had to do that, sir, because at the end of the day, there are still others that don't earn foreign exchange. And therefore, we would lose all of government's revenue if we didn't have a measure to be able to ring fence. Sir, we said that we want to boost CARICOM travel. We know that interregional travel has been beleaguered since COVID. We did it before, we're doing it again, but this time we're doing it for an extended period of 1 year, where we say reduce the air travel and tourism development fee for regional air travel from 35 US to 20 US. It may sound a little bit to people, but it is a lot to those who are traveling, especially traveling as a family. And much of Barbados' summer tourism is driven by regional tourism and family tourism from people coming from the other islands. Mr. Speaker, we indicated that to have growth, that we also felt that the monies which are aggregated in the credit union movement, that 25% of it should be allowed to participate in investments that hitherto they would not have been able to participate in, and that this is a platform for economic enfranchisement. Mr. Speaker, the credit unions belong to our people. We now have over 2.5 billion, and the Barbados Labour Party under Tom Adams was the one who spurred the growth of the credit union movement back from the 1970s, Mr. Speaker, with the tax incentives given then. Mr. Speaker, this minister, the member for Christchurch East Central, has been a strong defender of the credit union movement, and he has ensured that the same deposit insurance that we have to protect deposits in commercial banks by ordinary people will now be made available to the deposits in credit unions by ordinary Bajans. Mr. Speaker, I would not have minded listening to 10 hours talking about this, but that's not what we heard. Titillation and innuendo from a political lightweight, a political pearly. Mr. Speaker, we authorize in this budget the ability for credit unions in multiple forms to come together to participate so that they can reduce the exposure of the individual credit union. And Mr. Speaker, I hear all this talk, The Barbados Labour Party had a credit union called the Progressive League Credit Union. Been around for a while. You think when it came to us, it had some problems similar to other credit unions across the country? Did we hide? Did we seek to exclude the credit union? It suffered the same fate as the other credit unions that were not meeting the regulatory standards. I wish that would have been the situation with CLICO. Mr. Speaker, for real. This budget recognizes that the banks in this country have a duty to be able to help us lift some weight in being able to de-risk the mortgages. And bear with me for 2 minutes, sir, because people need to understand why we are adamant. And I thank the member for St. George South for giving the facts as to the less than 800 houses built by the last government in 10 years, and the fact that we are almost at 1,300. But that is not good enough for me, and it is not good enough for most of us on this side. And we have determined that even though we are 50% higher in less time, including a pandemic that took 2 to 3 years, than theirs in 10 years, that we need to be able to set ourselves some bold targets and to be ambitious. And what do I mean? If we can in this country, sir, and work with me, build 2,000 houses per year between the private and the public sector, on average of about $200,000, and I'm using a low average because a lot of the houses that are being sold by the private sector are closer to 300 and 350 and 400. But the government is trying to maintain prices down as low as 150,000, and in some instances possibly even lower if we can. But if you build 2,000 houses at $200,000 a piece per year, Mr. Speaker, that's $4 billion in activity in 1 year. $4 billion in economic activity, which works out to just under 3% of GDP growth. Now, Mr. Speaker, go through it. Work out that the contractors can make at least 15% out of that $4 billion. In 1 year, that's $600 million potentially in profit. The banks, well, they do better than everybody else because they're making not for that year, they're making for that year and 25 or 30, the banks and credit unions. The lawyers work out the fees, even if you cap it, as Hope has tried to do rather than using the law fees, the minimum non-contentious legal fees. You cap it at $2,500 a piece. $2,500 times 2,000 is $5 million in legal fees from one part of the equation. But the lawyer is also working for two others, because you have lawyer for purchaser, lawyer for vendor, lawyer for the mortgage. Mr. Speaker? So you're talking a minimum of $15 million in economic activity to the lawyers. Do you understand the point I'm making? Then we start to talk about the truckmen. Then we start to talk about the laborers and the carpenters and the masons. Then we start to talk about the steel benders. Then we start to talk about all of the people who have furnished the houses. Do you understand that that $4 billion in economic activity starts to mushroom by the time you now got to furnish the house and to do the other things? And Mr. Speaker, even though we have had issues and challenges with Hope, we have said we are not moving away from the objective, because most things when they start have teething problems. And the teething problems must never be an obstacle to progress. Now, I am still going to have the departmental inquiry. But when the Auditor General chose to take the files to see whether anything was amiss in Hope, we said let him go, because we do not want to stop him in any way. And Mr. Speaker, we didn't stop him. And when he is finished, then the departmental inquiry will start. But I'm also sure that you will find that those teething problems are being corrected along the way, every step of the way. But where we are now, sir, is that we want to also target people who earning between $1,000 and $2,000 a month, $800 and $2,000 a month. People, Mr. Speaker, in our constituencies who might be selling nuts, who might be selling akis. They do it every day, but they don't have no regular place that you can see where their income is. Mr. Speaker, the Mortgage Insurance Act was passed in this country to be able to help us de-risk. And what we did under Barbados Mortgage Finance Corporation should be celebrated in the post-independence history of this country. The default rate was less than 3%. And when Republic Bank bought Barbados National Bank, it also took Barbados Mortgage Finance Corporation with it. And what has happened over the years is that 1.5% is added to the mortgage to be able to deal with it almost as an insurance premium. And Mr. Speaker, I want to make this a document of the House, because this shows that that approach, which has been used first by Barbados Mortgage Finance and now used by Republic Bank, has yielded and has in the fund almost $26 million, $25.590 million at the end of December 24. But Mr. Speaker, at the end of 2017, it had $31.7 million. And while some people had to draw on it when people were laid off, the real reduction came in December 2020, in 2020 and 2021 during COVID. So that this mechanism came to the aid of those banks, for those persons who could no longer pay their mortgages and for whom the mortgage insurance was available. Now, the Minister of Finance, Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Minister, member for Christchurch East Central, has indicated that rather than wait for banks and credit unions to apply, we are now going to designate across the board all banks and all credit unions to be able to use the Mortgage Insurance Act so we can de-risk more people in there. Mr. Speaker, what does this mean? That in so doing, that we can literally take off of government's balance sheet the obligation of building those houses and renting them to people and allowing people to be able to own them. We also know that as in the case of Hope, you're not only getting the 220,000 cash money as Hope is getting at Vespera Gardens, you're getting the assignment of the roof. So that the money that is to be made on the roof for 15 years will allow Hope to be able to recover its investment. But there has been hiccups, as I said, and what is the biggest hiccup? That the FTC has not put us in a position to be able to deal easily with the issue of batteries. And in the interim, the Light and Power reached grid instability, and without batteries, they can't bring other people into the system. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is why in this budget as well, we have said that the Smart Loan Fund of $15.3 million will now be made available to Bajans who went and bought PV systems, install them, but cannot get them connected because the Light and Power is not prepared to connect them because of the same grid instability and the batteries are not yet available. Sir, we expect to get the batteries by the end of this year, early next year. But in the interim, the people have to live. And therefore, we will take them on their loans on board, and we will give them a 1-year moratorium on payments until such time, sir, that they can start to earn money from it. Mr. Speaker, that is the kind of creative ingenuity that we have done here with this budget. The banks, we are asking to be far more proactive. And Mr. Speaker, banks that in this country, that in 2024, with pre-tax profits, have earned $208 million. 2023, $272 million. Retained after-tax profits, 2023, $257 million, 2024, $186 million. Mr. Speaker, they live in Barbados. They've got to start taking a chance on ordinary people in this country, and the Mortgage Insurance Act, in our view, is one of the ways to help de-risk the applicants and to give the banks greater prudential care as it relates to them. But I go further. The same banks, I hope, as while I'm on the topic, will make it possible for people to open bank accounts in this country in quick order. We are embarrassed when companies come to this country and cannot get a bank account open in under 2 and 3 months. It has improved, I'm told, with Bajan individuals, but still, there are some who are complaining. I went in behind here at Royal Bank at 16 years old and opened an account in less than a half hour. And Mr. Speaker, our people must not be financial pariahs in their own country. That is what this budget is about, trying to make sure that it doesn't happen. Sir, we also address the issue, and in fairness, they say the minister, the member for Christchurch East Central, can be a Scrooge, but there was no Scrooge-like behavior in this budget. And even though he knows how to collect taxes, he shared the burden across the board. The $10 levy. No, I ain't coming to that yet. The $10 levy for car rentals is not by any means disproportionate. People rent cars in this country for $100 and $150 a day. And Mr. Speaker, we've said to those who do not have H permits, come and make yourself right. There's no cap on them. But if you don't make yourself right between now and the end of June, then be prepared for penalties that will come. And as we talk about H cars, let me also address the issue of the habit of people using C plates as taxis, as ZRs, and as H cars. It cannot work. And the government is going to take a very dim view on people who seek to use the wrong category for purposes for which they were not intended. Sir, the minister will tomorrow, in the wrap-up, also address matters pertaining to administrative issues for late filings and penalties in this country to modernize the functioning of the Ministry of Finance. And I look forward to his doing so. But Mr. Speaker, we recognize that one of the key issues constraining growth in this country is crime, is chronic NCDs, is lack of productivity. Sir, we are a cricketing nation, and we know that it isn't only the fours and the sixes that make and win the match. The leg buys and the buys and the no balls can cost you the match. And therefore, the actions of each and every Barbadian in terms of making sure that we can minimize the incidence of chronic NCDs in this country is important. We are spending too much money on healthcare in circumstances where people's well-being can be contained by the individual. And we are saying, look, in this cost of living environment, we're not going to tax salty foods at this point in time. We're not going to tax sugary foods any more than we've done. But we're going to have a strong public education program, because I don't like going to funerals and crying for people that are gone. And people will go if they continue on a pathway that does not allow for healthy living. But in the interim, we don't need some of the snacks in the abundance in which we eat it. That everything is good in moderation. I ain't telling you don't eat nuts occasionally. I ain't telling you don't eat Pringles occasionally. But if you eat it once every 2-3 months, it's not the same as eating it every week or every day. And therefore the excise taxes are intended to be a deterrent, but equally, they're intended to make it a little more expensive, so you don't want to eat it every day. Straight talk. And I believe, sir, that we can achieve that work together. The member for Christchurch so does not see people, so does not care for people, that he described this budget as a conqueror's pedicure budget. Mr. Speaker, tell me, whose feet we trying to save in here? Feet from the people in the Republic of Tanzania? In Portugal? Mr. Speaker, Barbados is known as one of the amputee capitals because of the high incidence of diabetes. And Mr. Speaker, I make no shame in telling the country that I asked for this project. And you know why I asked for it? Because I'm tired, year after year after year, seeing men and women succumb to the loss of toes, the loss of feet, the loss of legs, suffering from sepsis, all because of uncontrolled diabetes, starting with what they consider normal behavior. They've been walking about barefoot all along. They ain't quite get it that they really need to take care of themselves. Some of them have never been for a pedicure in their life. And we need to get across the message that this is not a luxury, this is a basic need in order to have foot care in this country to protect limbs and lives in Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, the government has always been that entity that tries to shape behavior. You heard me speak about Tom Adams earlier and the credit union, and the fact that today we have a credit union movement with over $2.5 billion in savings. He did it with solar water heaters as well. It is almost inconceivable for us to build a house in this country without having a solar water heater. Mr. Speaker, I want the behavior to change. We may not be able to give them a pedicure every month or every 2 months, but if we start with people over 70 and the rest in the household see it, the highest in the household will get an idea of what they should be doing. And the person who like it and may get $100 or $200 from somebody overseas as a birthday gift, they say, I would like to do that little thing again because it felt good and my feet look real good. That is the kind of change of behavior that we want. But it is being poo-pooed. Remember, also address the issue of union dues. We have been very clear, and then could have the gall to come in here and talk about who's siding with big business. When, as the member for St. Peter said, when the legislation came in here for labor concessions, to be able to ensure that hotel workers are not unfair in this country, the member for Christchurch South could not be found supporting it. Mr. Speaker, don't judge us by our words. 10 hours of fluff and no action whatsoever. No, Mr. Speaker. Queen's Park is a little couple hundred yards up the road, not down here. Down here is the Parliament. He wants to be in Queen's Park Theatre. He wants to be acting. He got the wrong location. Mr. Speaker, this budget went ahead and said, look, to the hotel workers, there was a big problem in reaching the agreement on the issue of the meal allowances. The member for St. Michael West Central can tell you, and one of the issues was where people do not have the facilities to provide meals, whether when you provide the meal allowance at $20 a day or whatever they settled at, whether you would be able to guarantee that workers would not be put into a higher tax bracket and therefore be disadvantaged. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that sees and feels and hears people, and the hotel workers now can benefit from a non-taxable meal allowance that does not in any way compromise the gains that they have received. Mr. Speaker, I'm not plucking these things from midair, and I don't have to speak to 10 hours for 10 hours to show you how a government is making an appreciable difference in the lives of the people of this country. Sir, you mean when he crossed from Mars to Pluto, you mean he couldn't even see the maternity leave and the paternity leave? Not even from Mars to Pluto? Or from Jupiter to Saturn? No, Mr. Speaker. What madness is this? This country is walking. When we introduced minimum wage legislation in the middle of COVID, people told us don't do it. It's going to bust. Mr. Speaker, we are now on the verge of having the minimum wage board recommend to the country what the revision should be from the $8.50 per hour. And Mr. Speaker, what the minister has done in the budget, the Honourable Minister has said, whatever they come in at, every year from now on, in between the major reviews of the National Minimum Wage Board, we are going to push you up 2% because you should not be faltering. Last year, inflation in this country was 1.4%. 1.4%. He wants to dispute that, just as he wants to dispute growth. He's now telling us about something called inflationary growth, as if he doesn't know the difference between nominal growth and real growth. But I'm not getting into those discussions with him, sir, because he distorts to confuse. He may well be confused too, but I give him the benefit of the doubt and say he distorts to confuse. I am saying to you, sir, that we have a budget before us that is well thought out. When I came here 2 weeks after this government was elected for the first time in 2018, I told the country that we would have to face $1 billion structural adjustment. And I said then, sir, that I was asking, just as I had told Madame Lagarde on the Thursday after the government came in, 6 days after, when we said we were going to the IMF, that you have to give people a little breakfast and that you have to create solidarity among your people. I asked the people of Barbados as Prime Minister to walk with us and to share the burden, and that the day that came where there was bounty, I gave the commitment that we would share bounty. Sir, at the beginning of this speech, I told you what the increase in corporation taxes is this year. I had hoped, sir, that we would have been in a position to make structural adjustments to the taxes. We are not in such a position to do so because, Mr. Speaker, you have seen, just as I have, over the course of the last few weeks, what has happened with the stock market and what has happened, Mr. Speaker, with people's sense of fear. We've had almost a 9% increase in the stock market. We do not know where the balance will end up on aspects of the global minimum taxation, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. And even though we increased our tax rate to 9%, corporation-wise, it is the minimum top-up tax that is still to be taken. And there are still countries who have committed so to do, particularly in Europe, and like ourselves and Canada. And therefore, this government took the approach, sir, that was taken in the past by Grantley Adams, by Errol Barrow, and by others, to treat to that more in the context of a windfall, and to use the increased earnings to help us stimulate growth, to help us pay down some debt, but in so doing, to also carry along Bajans in solidarity for walking with us in the last 7 years. And that is the genesis, sir, of the Solidarity Levy. That every Bajan must appreciate that they are being appreciated, and that we understand that over the course of the last 7 years, things have not always been easy. But that whenever we can, just as your parent or grandparent does in a household, and they have a little extra, they share it with you. That is the Bajan way, Mr. Speaker. And hence the Solidarity Levy of $300 for every Bajan over 18 will be, who is ordinarily resident here in the last 12 months, will be undertaken. Those who work and who are in the NIS roll, or those who are pensioners, contributory or non-contributory, those who are on the invalidity benefit list, or those who are on the list of the Welfare Department, soon to be the Social Empowerment Agency, you need not worry, because the government has your information and therefore will push out the funds between now and the end of May. Those, however, who are not working or who are not on welfare will have to present themselves with their ID, with their proof of address, and the government will very shortly identify the locations across the island where you will come and give your information, and where the information then will be validated, and then thereafter you will get the funds either through direct deposit or, if necessary, through check. So, Mr. Speaker, that Solidarity Levy has its genesis in our commitment philosophically to walk in step with Barbadians, because rough times will come again and bountiful times will come again. But we succeed when we move collectively as a people, rather than outside with one here and one there and one there. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we keep faith with the people of Barbados with this Solidarity Levy. The last initiative was in the budget related to how do we make ourselves look better for our 60th birthday, 60th anniversary. Because from the 1st of December this year, well, my birthday is, I'm 60 this year, but the country is formally 60 next year. But like with everything else, the anniversary starts on the day after the 59th anniversary finishes. And therefore, from the 1st of December, the country will embark on its 60th birthday celebrations. And we believe that in preparation for that we would like the place to look a certain way, and that we would want people to be able to paint their houses and to have the gardens look in a certain way. We will have a competition that will be parish-based, but equally will be national-based among the best in the parishes. And that we will also have the best community and not just the best individual house. But what are we doing when we're doing all of this, sir? We're making sure that people who can paint, and people who can do a little work helping in landscaping, and people who can change a few boards, because you can't only change paint on boards that can't take the paint, that they are getting a little money coming to them too, in the same way, a little trala, as Dame Billy would say. And Mr. Speaker, therefore, when we speak about inclusive growth, the budget is dotted with things from the podiatry project, to the painting project, to the no VAT, or duties on the commercial kitchen equipment. And Mr. Speaker, we didn't stop there. The minister laid out for you all the things we did to reduce cost of living in this country. And then he went on to tell you about all the other things. Because, Mr. Speaker, on top of what we left there, tell me what else you're getting. Stew beef. The VAT getting take off of that. Remember England, remember for Christchurch, Southing, and talk about that, because he don't care whether families really can afford to buy food or not. Minced meat, minced pork, minced turkey, Vienna sausages, Horlicks. I don't like Horlicks. If people ask about Milo, but I didn't buy Milo on the list already. So Horlicks is only an addition. Sega, lentil peas, split peas, pigeon peas, and black-eyed peas on the list already. So that, Mr. Speaker, we expanded the list of items to make it easier for every Bajan household, accessing protein from stew beef to the minced meat, to the minced pork, to the minced turkey, to the lentil peas. And for those who talk about fresh fruit, Mr. Speaker, we said take off the duties off of the Ortaniques and the not just the oranges that were there before, the Ortaniques and the mandarins, the plums. The grapes already have it off. The grapefruit already has it off. Mr. Speaker, the pineapples and the pears, not the Bajan pears, but the pears that you get from overseas, what they call it, the Bosch pears or whatever they call it. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that is meeting people where they are, not where they want to be put into a box by a leader of the opposition. These are real facts. This is not innuendo. These are things that are subject to become law under the provisional collection of taxes, and we're not so after. And Mr. Speaker, I haven't even talked about the Barbados Ocean and Coastal Authority and the fact that which we are reducing our beaches through erosion. And that if we don't stop it, that is what pays our bills, Mr. Speaker. Don't let's get tied up. We learned it in COVID when we had no tourists come. It didn't only affect hotels and hotel workers, it affected the farmers. Member of St. Philip South will tell you that. It affected the people who drive the trucks. The member for St. James South will tell you that, who deliver all the produce to all the small shops all across the country. Everybody was affected. And Mr. Speaker, not a word on those initiatives from the member for Christchurch South. Mr. Speaker, his interest relies only on political parallelisms and scandal, innuendo, no context. And we are going to cut the contrast. Mr. Speaker, he wants to talk to you about me traveling over the globe. Mr. Speaker, I don't travel for holiday. I travel in the name of the people of this country to be able to secure benefits. And Mr. Speaker, I challenge anyone to dispute our record. But for the avoidance of doubt, sir, I have asked my office to prepare my travel for every single year. From 2018, when I first went to St. Lucia for the OECS, and CARICOM heads immediately thereafter, right down through the 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and yes, Mr. Speaker, 2025. 2025 alone is a perfect example. All the talk. Middle of March, I went out for 2 days. In fact, it was 1 day, one night. So that the cabinet paper may reflect 2 days, but I went for 1 night. to Suriname as chairman of CARICOM to give a speech. I went to UAE to receive the Zayed Award, and I know that that will be contentious, but guess what? Not a cent at the cost of the government of Barbados, either for airfare or hotels. And Mr. Speaker, I could have refused it, I suppose. Mr. Speaker, when I went to Africa, to Lagos, UAE, to the World Government Summit, where as chair of the V20 Forum, where I chair 70 countries of the world who are seeking to be able to build climate resilience, to deal with debt and to deal with health-related matters to climate, spoke at the World Digital Summit, and then went to the African Union as chairman of CARICOM. And Mr. Speaker, because of the fact that I also spoke on behalf of an entity with whom we had been working for the last 3 years in Barbados because of people who had died in a plane crash, we did not pay for that early part of it, and that entire trip cost $18,229.60. For the entire year, my travel has come to $19,660.95. It's marked on, you may say, but let's go. You go on each of them. I have done the total, and in 7 years, the total amount comes to just about $1.457 million across 93 trips, with an average of $15,000 per trip, Mr. Speaker. I don't travel first class. I go at the last possible minute and return at the earliest possible minute. I do not stay in luxury suites, as was the wont of many a minister before this government came into office. And Mr. Speaker, everything is here. Attendance, look at all of them. If it isn't CARICOM meetings, it is the UN meetings. If it isn't the UN meetings, it is the COP meetings. If it isn't COP, it is individual meetings that require us security. On occasion, I have done 1 or 2 speeches. And Mr. Speaker, if I were only spending money, I wouldn't mind. You might curse me. That 1.45 million, you know what I asked the PS to prepare for me too, sir? What are the benefits in terms of grants that this government has gotten as a result of that travel? Mr. Speaker, would you believe that this government, and I'm going to be fair, because when the ministry prepared this, they included one figure that came at the beginning of 2018, and I don't have nothing to hide. So I told the minister, take that $27 million out. 27.6 million and 83,000. Take it out. So subtract that from $146,887,000 in grant money. Not loans. Mr. Speaker, you know what grant money is? It's free. When you walk out of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, fella, give me $20 there. That is free money. And Mr. Speaker, what is the grant money for? Mr. Speaker, we got this government, and it is fortuitous. And I want to thank them on behalf of the people of Barbados, because as we meet in Parliament tonight, the Sustainable Energy for All Conference from the United Nations, with over 1,300 registered participants, was opened in this country today and will continue tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, among the people who have visited, and I want to salute our brother, the President of Sierra Leone, who is here as well, the Deputy Prime Minister of Tanzania, the Minister of Finance of Nigeria, the former Vice President of Nigeria, the former Second Lady of Ghana, but among them were also heads of entities. And fortuitously, the head of the Green Climate Fund is in the country for the first time as we have this debate in this Parliament today. Mr. Speaker, for those who don't know, the Green Climate Fund is in the area that I have been given the opportunity to be an advocate for globally, which is on climate. And that is where we've gotten the majority of grants. And that is where we go to the COP. And that is where, when we carry the delegations that he's talking about, between the Inter-American Development Bank and other entities, help to pay for those delegations. Why? Because they want to hear the voice of Barbados, because the voice of Barbados has been strong, has been credible, and has pushed the envelope. Mr. Speaker, people talk now, globally, about natural disaster clauses. Mr. Speaker, if I didn't have natural disaster clauses that could unlock $2.5 billion over a 2-year period in the event of an emergency, we would not be talking about 0.25% in a regenerative and resilience fund. We would have to be putting in 2 to 3%. But Mr. Speaker, we have that. And the first thing we got, Prince Small Boy, 60 coming on and through. In 2022, because of the work that we put in from day one in 2018 and 19, and it continued to do even during the pandemic, this country was awarded $39.4 million US. That is 79.8. No, 78.8 million Barbados dollars. Mr. Speaker, who's give us $79 million in grant? But you think that's all that they gave, sir? They came back again. And you know what that was for? Look, I ain't jumping over this money because people can say, I know what that money for. That money is to upgrade the Bridgetown sewage treatment plant. You know the people in the member for the city of Bridgetown who were complaining about how that plant is operating, all the negative orders and all of them things that they've been suffering from. It is then to take pipes from that plant, or let me put it another way, the pipes are coming down from the bell to that plant for thousands of Bajans. Remember, for St. Michaelis has come in here and made a cry year after year after year after year about the fact that his constituents cannot get security of tenure, cannot go off to the bank and borrow cent one because they are not connected to the sewage system. They don't have the ability to have toilets, waterborne facilities. Nobody is going to give them planning permission. Mr. Speaker, I talk about the member for St. Michaelis, but it also includes, Mr. Speaker, the residents of Bellevue, represented by you, Mr. Speaker. That grant money helps us there. Mr. Speaker, the debt for climate swap that he still cannot get his head around. Another 80 million Barbados dollars coming in grant funds, helping his constituency in Christchurch. So, but the truth, he does not have a constituency anymore. Why are we fooling ourselves? Remember, for St. Michael South Central reminded him that at least she knows where she's running. He didn't know where he's running, and she was absolutely correct. Because I never know how a leader can go to an executive council meeting and approve 15 candidates and cannot get himself approved. Because the people tell him, don't put your eyes on St. John. That's where he won't run, because he believes that simply by saying, I am the leader of the Democratic Labour Party, that greatness shall be conferred upon me in St. John. Well, remember, for St. John and the rest of St. John got news for him, including the people who work for him in the opposition office. No, Mr. Speaker. Let's go on. Do you understand what $146,887,863.49 is? Mr. Speaker, this is an old political playbook. It is true that he is almost 70, but he can at least pretend to live in a modern world. And the bottom line is, sir, that this notion of nickel and diamond Bajans and making people feel that because you call 70,000 US, yes, it is a lot of money to people who are at the bottom, and we know that. That is why this government is working so hard to be able to help people lift themselves out of poverty and lift themselves from lower middle income status and lift themselves from middle income status. But don't believe that you can do the country's work. This is not a rum shop. This is not a community shop. This is not a community center. This is not even a law office. But he believes it's okay for a law office to charge $141,000 for one case, but a country can't buy the services that it needs globally to keep it alive and stable and up. Mr. Speaker, this government will govern. And we will govern in the interests of the people. Our record, both good and bad, will stand to be judged by the people of Barbados. We've never veered from that. And that is why I've said that the words in Corinthians will continue to be embraced by us. Because, Mr. Speaker, I have not come to public life to do anything other than to represent people and to allow people in this country to be the best that they can be. And, Mr. Speaker, when we go and travel and we make the cases, nobody used the natural disaster clauses until we, at scale. Before us was Seychelles and Grenada. But Barbados became the largest issuer of natural disaster clauses. We took up the battle of telling the world in the Bridgetown Initiative, do it. One of the things and the trips that he quarrels with me for is being in Paris with the President of France when the Bridgetown Initiative spurred on the Pact for People and Planet that has been globally accepted and that recognizes now that the World Bank will in fact give debt pause clauses, the same thing, because you know once we name it, the North Atlantic countries is rename it. Debt pause clause is a natural disaster clause. And the countries across the world from the Pacific, from Vanuatu and Samoa, to the countries in the Caribbean, to the countries in the Indian Ocean, to countries in Africa, to countries in Central and Latin America, because of the advocacy of the Bridgetown Initiative. When we went to argue for ourselves, clearly we were arguing for others in the developing world. And we have brought them along with us. And whereas 2 years ago a hurricane hit them, and or a cyclone hit them, and they can do nothing and got to still pay. Let me tell you about Dominica. We all remember Hurricane Maria. Dominica, in the midst of early recovery from that hurricane, sir, had to be looking to pay debt back to the World Bank when it could not even find money to give people to feed themselves in Roseau and all across Dominica. Mr. Speaker, that is what this travel has done. Mr. Speaker, I don't do it in my name. Anybody who knows me knows I don't even like you to introduce me with a CV and a resume. I tell you, call my name and let me jump on the stairs. That is me. But the reality is, Mr. Barrow said in the 1970s, early 70s, when he was assailed with the same allegations about travel, you cannot stand in Bay Street and earn money for the country. You cannot stand in Bay Street and earn money for the country. The same gentleman who leads the party may do well to remember that. But he should also go in Hansard and ask the Clerk of Parliament to carry for him the next time he condescends to come in here after this speech, after this debate, and carry for him the Hansard record where Mr. Barrow said that anybody who does not believe in debt financing, deficit financing, is anti-developmental because people that look like us didn't start with capital. He didn't say that, but he added that last part. There are very few people in this country who can build a house out of cash. We have to go to the bank and borrow. We have to incur debt, but we spread the debt over 20, 30 years so that when we finish, we can afford to pay it back. Mr. Speaker, I do not intend to hold this house any longer, but I have tried to come here to cut the contrast. I have tried to come here to show you a government that has brought a budget that is premised on the promotion of resilience, because we must protect our people's lives, limbs, and livelihoods. against both the climate crisis, against crime, and time will come for me to speak on that again, against the vagaries of physical and mental infirmities. We have come here, sir, to promote growth across different sectors, not just in large hotels, because we already have 6 hotels building with thousands of jobs. But we have also come to protect hotel workers, and we've come to protect those who need to be able to be part of a credible hospitality industry by making commercial industrial kitchen equipment affordable to them. We've come here to level the playing field with restaurants. We've come here to make our agricultural sector more climate resilient. We've come here, sir, to bring our credit union movement into the realities of a modern Barbados by ensuring that they have access to deposit insurance and by ensuring that they can pool together and that they can now invest in areas of activity that they were not able to do it before. We've come here to ease the cost of living by increasing the basket of goods without VAT and without import duties. We've come here, sir, to be able to ensure that we can bring new rules for maternity so that this nonsense that people can't draw maternity if they live alone benefits. And we've now added to it by being gender sensitive. Yes, Mr. Speaker, it has taken a woman to lead a government to give men paternity in this country. That is how it should be. Mr. Speaker, we have come here to bring a budget that might try to right size where we can take revenue by spreading the burden. When we came here, we were the ones who said increase the passenger travel tax, because if we don't, the taxes that we have to put on Bajans and their households and on their income will be unbearable. And Mr. Speaker, with all that we are doing, we have not imposed an increased income tax on anybody in this country since 2019 for the last 6 years. Mr. Speaker, this is a record that any government, any part of the world would envy to have. Is it perfect? No, it is not. And we never pretend to be perfect. And Mr. Speaker, I can come in here and I can talk about how we try to correct corruption. I can tell you about ministries where people, Mr. Speaker, were paying out monies without checking that the work is being done. I have the records too, sir. But I have not come in here to treat Parliament as a political cesspool. And if there are credible cases to be made for corruption, even when people rush and retire from the public service before they get found, not me, I don't lock up nobody, that is a matter for elsewhere. But we have all of that here. I haven't come here to tell you about the consultants in the last government who were drawing hundreds of thousands of dollars, sir. Because I understand, sir, that you cannot run a government just so. It is not a corner shop. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to disrespect the people of Barbados by acting in a way that prevents us from delivering from them. And the problem in the last administration, I'm going to be blunt now, the last Prime Minister has to take responsibility. Because even when the last Minister of Finance wanted to be able to restructure the state-owned enterprises, as he announced at the speech at the Chamber of Commerce in 2010, it was the last Prime Minister that put brakes on him and said he believed in a previous philosophy. He lives in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and they have not come in anywhere close to the 21st century. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not suggesting that philosophy changes, but the reality is that people lost their jobs, lost their homes. The last decade was thrust upon us, and this country became the 3rd most indebted in the world. And I'm saying to you, sir, it has taken careful stewardship. There are things that we are doing now that I wanted to do 4 and 5 years ago, but the COVID pandemic stopped it. I give this country the assurance that as long as I am your leader, as long as I have responsibility for this Barbados Labour Party government, that there is nothing called hiding. And if you want to be able to titillate people with 6 and 7 figures, then titillate them with the 9 and 10 figures too. Don't only tell them about the cost of travel, tell them also about the benefits. Because women leave home every morning and know that they've got to spend bus fare to go to work. And they're spending the bus fare before they draw the salary. So if you want to reduce it to its lowest level, shopkeepers know that they got to go in town and get credit in order to be able to get back the produce and product to be able to sell to earn the money. Mr. Speaker, government is no different. We don't engage, and if we only concentrated on this 166 square miles, sir, we would not earn to be able to relieve ourselves of the burden of the recession that we inherited from the last government. And Mr. Speaker, it has been through the careful nurturing of relationships, through the advocacy that we have put on the table, through the engagements, that we have been able to bring benefits in terms, and I haven't even started to talk about the concessional loans. I only talk about the grants, because I don't want to spend 2 and 5 and 10 hours in here to tell you things that Bajans already feel naturally. Every Bajan knows that things are better in 2025 than they were in 2018 when we came to government under the last administration. And I end on this point. He says that I'm a demon. He says that I'm a dictator. Well, Mr. Speaker, I am now going to go in the Guinness Book of World Records because I have never known a dictator to allow marches up and down Broad Street every 2 weeks. I have never known a dictator to allow speeches and all kinds of protests on everything. I have never known, Mr. Speaker, a dictator to allow a leader of the opposition 10 hours on national television. And Mr. Speaker, in so doing, we changed the rules of this parliament. Because for as long as my memory can carry me back, the leader of the opposition was only ever entitled to broadcast time equal to that of the minister presenting the budget. Mr. Speaker, we said, let him talk. Let him talk. Because the more people understand what is the contrast between what is offered here on record and what is offered there in theatrics, the more people will appreciate that they must not repeat the mistakes in their recent past. They went for change for the sake of change, and they ended up with a lost decade. Sir, we're not yet in an election. As much as he's calling it, he don't even have a seat to go on canvas. I have chosen to spend my time here not prosecuting the people who work in his office, who should be prosecuted for selling or trying to sell a house for $8,000 when the house was valued at $60,000 with a for sale price of $50,000. I haven't come in here for those things, sir. I ain't calling nobody name. But I have come in here to remind this country that if ever there was a time that has been perilous since independence, and if ever there has been a time that has been perilous since World War II, it is the world in which we live today, sir. It is the world in which we live. This matter with the Cubans and the nurses should tell us everything that we need to know. Barbados does not currently have Cuban medical staff or Cuban nurses, but I will be the first to go to the line and to tell you that we could not get through the pandemic without the Cuban nurses and the Cuban doctors. I will also be the first to tell you that we paid them the same thing that we pay Bajans, and that the notion, as was peddled not just by this government in the US, but the previous government, that we were involved in human trafficking by engaging with the Cuban nurses, was fully repudiated and rejected by us. Now, I don't believe that we have to shout across the seas, but I am prepared, like others in this region, that if we cannot reach a sensible agreement on this matter, then if the cost of it is the loss of my visa to the US, then so be it. But what matters to us is principles. And I have said over and over that principles only mean something when it is inconvenient to stand by it. Now, we don't have to shout, but we can be resolute. And I therefore look forward to standing with my CARICOM brothers. I wish I could say brothers and sisters, but brothers, to be able to ensure that we explain that what the Cubans have been able to do for us, far from approximating itself to human trafficking, has been to save lives and limbs and sight for many a Caribbean person. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope the contrast has been clear for all to see. We will continue in the service of the Barbadian people where there are things to answer, and I learned this as a young Minister of Education and a young Attorney General, that you cannot know what every single person in your ministry is doing. But where things are brought to our attention, we will act. Where there are things that he says that make sense as leader of the opposition, we will equally act. And I wasn't planning to do this, but I feel I have to do it, if only because that this nonsense and charades and parade of foolishness must stop. This government invited the leader of the opposition to serve on the Advisory Council of Citizen Security. He told us, and Cabinet Secretary, that he would be there on the Friday. The Attorney General would recall, the member for the city would recall, at the meeting that we had at Ilara Court. Only then, and he told me that he just wanted to have a conversation with his members of his party, but yes, he would serve. Mr. Speaker, he repudiated that agreement. No problem. These things happen. I know what it is to lead a party, but people have different leadership styles. Many of you saw me go behind the Speaker's chair 3 weeks ago. And I said to the member for Christchurch South that I really would like the opportunity for the members of the Ministry of Education to present to him what we propose to carry to Cabinet and what we propose to carry to the country. Because the only remaining issue, as the Minister said in his budget speech, is really the mechanism for transfer from primary to secondary. And because, and he found he could remember good, I said it last night, that from September 2026, that we would be seeking to have new arrangements put in place. Mr. Speaker, we arranged that he would bring a delegation, he said 4 or 5 people, and to have lunch in a private dining room in Parliament and to have the presentation made. The Chief Education Officer came, the Permanent Secretary came, the ministers were present. When I went downstairs, I saw him with most of his delegation at the other end of the dining room, and I went and said, but the others are inside waiting for you. He said, no, we can't make that today. We can't make that today. I said, tomorrow? He said, no. Former Minister of Foreign Affairs was standing up over him. I don't know if he was waiting for guidance from her. I said, next week? He said, man, I'll talk to your PS. And I left it, only to go and have to report to the public officers who had the presentation on the screen that he was no longer coming. Mr. Speaker, we took a photograph of Parliament here last Wednesday morning, and in the presence of the Senior Minister with responsibility for social sector and environment, Minister of Health, and myself, and one other person, I said, Ralph, sorry, I shouldn't have called his name. Can we do next week? His response to me was, you back with that thing again? Verbatim. Mr. Speaker, I would have hoped never to have to do this. But this charade must stop in this country. And I told him then, and I say it to the country publicly, there are 2 things that I believe should not divide political parties in this country because of their long-term nature: education reform and crime. Sir, none of us knows for whom the bell will toll. I, in spite of all of that, make this government available to a team from the Democratic Labour Party, even though my members feel that I am being stupid in reaching out and having an olive branch each time. And you know why? I spent 7 years in the Ministry of Education, and I spent 5 years as Attorney General with responsibility for fighting crime in this country. And I know, I know it requires a whole of government approach in each instance. And if we are to truly carry this country to the next level than this nonsense about trying to treat everything in a partisan manner. I said, abuse me on everything. Abuse me about the travel. Abuse me about housing. Abuse me about whatever you want. Abuse me about the budget. Yeah, I'll deal my hand, talk about it. Abuse me about anything. But on these two matters, for the sake of the children and the young people of this country, for the sake of the elderly people of this country who may feel unsafe in communities, let us sit down and have a national pact. And I want to say to the media, you have sought, correctly so, to play a correcting role against this government because you say that the people gave us 30 seats each time. And we have made ourselves, as Prime Minister, I reduced the powers of Prime Minister, never done before. I no longer can choose a head of state. I no longer can choose Supreme Court or Court of Appeal judges. And only recently, we have agreed to bring in here that instead of me being able to designate and have cabinet agree to the renaming of places and buildings and parks and locations, I said no. Send it to the National Honours Committee, on which the opposition has membership. And Mr. Speaker, a bill will come in here now soon to confer national honours automatically on the Chief Justice, on the Chief of Staff, on the Commissioner of Police. And I have forbid my cabinet from putting the Prime Minister in there because I don't want to be in there. But the country must do the right thing by the other posts in this country. And I say these things, sir, because I sense with the gray hair that I have and the age 60 creeping in on me quickly, that there are certain things that are worth standing for. I used to sit at the end of this front bench next to the then member for Christchurch South. The then member for Christchurch South. He was conferred with the honor and dignity of being able to sit on the front bench by the Prime Minister and Parliament, even though he was not in cabinet. And he said to me, and I've said this over and over, he said, young girl, a time is going to come when you're going to have to legislate everything in this country, because the conventions that people hold by will no longer hold. We saw an example of it with the 10-hour speech in here today, because it was an abuse of privilege. And the last time it happened, in the early 70s, and I've asked the clerk to research it, my father has told me about it many a time because he was a member of this chamber between 1969 and 1976. And the estimates in those days would go on and on and on and on. And it went on so long. And the only thing that stopped it after 2, 3 o'clock a Friday night into Saturday morning was cricket at Kensington Oval. And Mr. Barra took the opportunity then to change the rules and impose what we then came to know for over 40 years with the guillotine coming down on the heads. So there's no open-ended debate because everybody recognizes that time is money. What Mr. Barra didn't do was to change and put a time limit on second reading speeches. But the clerk has advised us that almost most modern parliaments have time limits. Now, we never had to be forced into that position, because even when men give, and even me on occasion give 4 or 5 hour speeches, that it was never to the point where it went on and on and on. But this parliament, Mr. Speaker, and you are to be commended for it, you did not even remind him of his persistent breaches of the rule with repetition. And there were certain things I heard at least 8 and 9 times in the 10 hours. And Mr. Speaker, I don't say this because I am closer to the end of my public career than I am to the beginning. And I say so for the benefit of those who must come. When you go before the United States Supreme Court, you have 30 minutes to make your case on matters that affect life. In the International Court of Justice, the Honourable Member for St. James Central just came back. You have 15 minutes. Mr. Speaker, this is a serious country. This is a serious parliament, the 3rd oldest in the Commonwealth. I pray that if nothing else comes out of this debate, that it will be a commitment to elevate the seriousness with which we treat to this annual exercise of estimates of expenditure and budgetary and economic proposals. I believe that we've tried to keep our course on this matter. And I trust and pray that the members of the country will understand when we go in now to a fourth day, because I do not believe that it is fair on the workers of Parliament, on the police, on the people who service Parliament, to ask them to remain, and certainly to those who have been doing yeoman service with signing, to be able to ensure that all of our people understand and appreciate. And I've therefore asked, we will go probably for another 45 minutes to an hour, and we will shut off tonight. And we have taken the decision to postpone Cabinet tomorrow to facilitate the conclusion of this debate, because the people must be allowed to hear their representatives in this annual appropriations bill, which is the centerpiece of the financial year in our Parliament. And if Cabinet has not to be able to meet tomorrow to facilitate this debate because of the 10-hour speech, so be it. We understand the games and the theatrics, and we understand that the only place he was interested in going when he left here was to walk about town, because he is more interested in the likes than the love for it. Well, Mr. Speaker, this government is in it for the love of it and not simply the likes. I want to commend this budget, and I want at the very end to say to Barbados that if something should happen to me, God forbid, tomorrow, I know that I have left in your hands a capable, a confident young man who has acquitted himself with distinction as the member for Christchurch East Central, but equally as a minister in the Ministry of Finance. And I will tell you the public the truth, that the only thing standing in his way between now and being fully Minister of Finance is the fact that we come out of an IMF program in May or June of this year. And we're going to have to go to the market for the first time since this government has come to office. And while I do not claim any major things, I do know that I have a bit of credibility internationally. And I do believe that I need to leverage that credibility for the benefit of this country in terms of our re-entry into the market. Once I am satisfied that I have done so, I will have the greatest pleasure in removing from myself the portfolio of Ministry of Finance.
Honourable St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I had in my notes to begin by saying how proud I am of the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, and I am. But I think we are all very equally proud of our Prime Minister, who delivered and always delivers excellent performances and speeches, but that, I must confess, is one of the best ones I have heard delivered by the Honourable Prime Minister, timely, to the point, and I believe shares a lot of points in relation to what it is that we brought forward in this budget and why we brought them forward. Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't intend to be long, as everyone realizes the hour really is late. But I will begin by asking the good Lord to guide my words at the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart, be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. And Mr. Speaker, I do so because I've asked my friends and my family, having listened to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, what should I really say? And therefore to guide my words as I speak during the course of my very brief presentation. But I must confess that the presentation by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition will go down as perhaps one of the longest, go down in infamy as perhaps one of the longest, but certainly the emptiest response to a budget ever visited on the people of Barbados in the history of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to begin because the thesis that was presented by the Leader of the Opposition would give Barbadians a reason to think that this government is up to something underhand. And I used to, as a boy, sir, as a young man, spend my time reading a lot of the philosophers and a lot of the Greek philosophers. I read all kinds of things. I love the work of Plato, particularly the allegory of the cave. And for those who haven't read it, I suggest that they do. But the honorable member for Christchurch South did a whole presentation in which the essence of his presentation was show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. Show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. But if you were to read, Mr. Speaker, and I am convinced that the honorable leader of the opposition is just talk and theater. Because if you read Plato's work, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Speaker, you would realize, I'm sure you already know anyhow, that the tyranny Plato is speaking of, he says, is that there's too much freedom. And therefore, when he accuses the government by Plato's standard of tyranny, he could only be encouraging us or deciding that we should give people less freedoms. Plato goes on to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, and this is important. Plato goes on to say that the problem is that we are dispensing authority to some who are not equal, and therefore allowing men who are not equal to occupy high office. It is an elitist approach to governance, Mr. Speaker. So the entire treatise that we got from the honorable leader of the opposition is an elite perspective on how a country should be governed. When Plato speaks of tyranny, he's not talking about men stealing from poor people. He is talking about men elevating poor people. So when the leader of the opposition uses him as his judging mark, his gauge stick, what is he saying to the people of Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir? After that, he went on to talk about Hobbes. And I had the good fortune of teaching social contract theory while I was a lecturer at the UE for 10 years. You can't tell me about Hobbes. But the honorable leader of the opposition, sir, he went on to tell us how Hobbes said life is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. And therefore, it is at the worst of times, there's a war of all against all. But what was the recommendation from Hobbes? These are the men that he looks up to. Plato said you need to have a philosopher king. That was Plato. After all of this, you need a philosopher king. You need a member for Christchurch South. A philosopher king. Hobbes goes on to argue you need a sovereign. After all of this, you need a one man, a strong man. So when life is brutish and short, Hobbes says very clearly, you need to submit to a dictator. Read it, Mr. Speaker. So the two theories that he is using to base his whole argument on in relation to this Labour Party are flawed, but they speak to the mind, the elitist mind of the leader of the opposition who cares nothing about poor people, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I will not be lectured by him on anything regarding social policy ever. If I did not know that before he spoke on Plato and Hobbes, I know it now. He's a half a man, half of the theory, half of the idea. And we should not submit ourselves to that kind of thing, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let me go on, Mr. Speaker, sir. The honorable leader of the opposition came with 4 questions. The second question was, what should humans do in the face of deception? This is the man, sir, who should ask this question to the people of Christchurch South. What should humans do in the face of deception? Well, he needs to ask and answer that question for himself, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because I know that I presented myself as a member of this Labour Party. And I told the people what I intended to do, the kind of representative that I would be, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I know all across this country I have held true to that. All of a sudden, the honorable leader of the opposition telling us about canvassing. When was he a canvasser, Mr. Speaker, sir? When I was responsible as minister responsible for maritime, when I would spend time in the fish markets, I could not find a leader for Christchurch South. Mr. Speaker, sir, he came on occasion, but many times I could not find him. I will not be lectured by him on how to treat to ordinary people in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. And then we have to now allow me to say, because he called the name Miss Mapp into a political conversation. I know the lady, she was a decent lady, Mr. Speaker, sir. But to use that for political mileage is sick, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is sick. But let me continue, sir, because I want the public to understand that we were treated to an elitist presentation by an elitist, Mr. Speaker, sir. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition then went on to say that having the member for Christchurch East Central deliver the budget would lower the prestige of the occasion. Not because the Honourable Leader did not deliver a budget of substance, not because he was not articulate, not because he did not present something that was forward-thinking for this country, but because the Leader of the Opposition believes that if a Leader of the Opposition has to respond, he should only be responding to a Prime Minister. The entire presentation by the Leader of the Opposition was an elitist presentation, Mr. Speaker, sir. And let none of us be fooled. Walking through town now trying to tell people he cares about people. An elitist presentation, Mr. Speaker, sir. And he would try to reduce the Honourable Member, sir, for Christchurch East Central to being beneath the occasion because he wanted to respond to a Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I will show you by the end of my presentation, sir, that most of what the Leader of the Opposition says is about the Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to spend a little time, but I don't have the time. But there was a book by Sam Beckett, a play called Waiting for Godot. If you haven't read it, again, I commend it to the people of Barbados. Waiting for Godot, it's a play, sir. But that play, at the very end of it, sir, the play tells you it is a long conversation at the end of it, sir, of nothing, that leads to nothing. Like the speech given by the opposition leader, sir. It was like waiting for Godot, a point that never came, Mr. Speaker. And we had to subject ourselves to 10 hours, Mr. Speaker, sir. But if you did not believe, or if you do not believe what I am saying, understand the motives. The Honourable Member for St. Peter said when he spoke, when somebody tells you who they are, he was quoting someone else, but believe them. We were then told that he was in a bank or a supermarket, and a lady who was well-dressed went to another man, and that man had $120 on his bank account, telling the opposition leader, I only have $120 on my bank account, but there is a lady here who has nothing to eat. That man who had $120 took $50 off of his bank account to give the lady who had nothing to eat, and he praises the man, as he should. But what did he do, Mr. Speaker, sir? Absolutely nothing. A nothing man, Mr. Speaker, sir. What did he do? And if you read, Mr. Speaker, sir, Alex Haley's Malcolm X, sir, there's a whole scene where Malcolm X, the story is told to the Honourable Elijah Muhammad of a man who said, I had my last, and this man came to me, he had $10 left, and he gave me his full $10. And the Honourable Elijah Muhammad asked him, did you take it all? And he said, yes. He said, well, that man was a better friend to you than you were to that man. And that man was a better person to that lady than you were to that lady, to the people of Christchurch South, to the people in this Labour Party who supported you, and the people in town that you went in there to deceive today, Mr. Speaker, sir. The Honourable Member for Christchurch South. And the reality is, sir, I will not then be lectured in here about what I have to do as a minister for people who need things by the Leader of the Opposition who determined that he should praise a man who had $70 left to help a well-dressed lady when he gave nothing, Mr. Speaker, sir. Well, if that does not tell you the nature of the man, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Leader, nothing will, Mr. Speaker. And I will not be lectured by him, Mr. Speaker, sir, but it gets worse. And I haven't yet gotten to the budget, but I feel as if I have to explain what we heard today and what was said, what was unsaid. Mr. Speaker, sir, The honorable leader of the opposition then in his next breath, because it was just getting worse and worse, it's like with every minute he was digging himself deeper and deeper. The honorable leader of the opposition said about your children and my children and the children of this great nation. He said that the minds and souls, their minds and their souls are separated from good values. Listen to it. He is talking about the children in the Bayland and in Britainsill, Mr. Speaker, sir. The children in St. Michael East, all over the Pine, Wildy, Mr. Speaker, sir. Their minds and their soul, he's God. Their souls, their minds and their souls are separated from good values. Listen to it, Mr. Speaker, sir. And then, you know, what bothers him is that if anybody says anything, he gets very annoyed, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I let him talk. But who is he talking about? He can't mean my two daughters, Mr. Speaker, sir. He can't mean your children, Mr. Speaker. And I believe, sir, that we have seen enough of people to know that even those in Barbados who are given trouble sometimes can be saved. I stand here, Mr. Speaker, sir, because a head teacher at the St. Michael School permit me to say, when the Griffith Watson believed in me when many people did not, sir. I don't get, sir, this language. Their minds and their souls are separated from good value. You know somebody's soul for your Christ, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we have to listen to that for 10 hours? For 10 hours, Mr. Speaker, sir? And, you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, permit me to digress, because the honorable leader, during the time that I was in the well, he kept referring to $500,000 that we gave to the Alliance to End Homelessness. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have in Barbados some homeless persons. I would not call it a crisis, because as a matter of fact, somebody remarked to me today that they're seeing less and less homeless people. But we determined that we needed to do something about homelessness when we became the government, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have, as a government, sir, done a number of things. We had a policy on homelessness, Mr. Speaker, sir, this government. We have done a homeless count. So for all the talk that the Democratic Labour Party is talking, they had no policy. We then did a count, sir, of the homeless and where they are so we could identify them and their traits, sir, and try to come up with some help. Sir, they had none. We created a resilience unit, sir, with one of its specific mandates to address homelessness in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. They had none of that, Mr. Speaker, sir. And as a matter of fact, I was asking my PS, sir, because I asked the PS. I did not call my chairman of my branch. I didn't call my personal assistant. I called the permanent secretary in the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, because this was done properly, Mr. Speaker. So send me the proposal that was sent to this ministry. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me tell you, because the Democratic Labour Party and the honorable leader of the opposition would want Barbados to believe that they care about homelessness. And they care about the homeless. And you can ask them how much money they allocated to any project, because I've just shown you that they've done no work, there's no policy, there's no legislation, there's no agency. Ask them how much money they committed to helping the homeless, Mr. Speaker, sir. Zero, Mr. Speaker. In the 10 years that they were in office, proposal after proposal after proposal. And I would like to come here and tell you that these are the things that they did, sir. But if I were, I would have to sing Duke Check Edie song. These are the things that the Dems did. And I could probably do it for 10 hours, Mr. Speaker, sir. The point remains, sir, that the Democratic Labour Party, particularly this version of the Democratic Labour Party, worse than the last version, if you could believe it, continues to come in here, sir, and parade as if they have done something for the poor and for the needy, Mr. Speaker, sir. I did the numbers, and I will go through them before the end of this presentation, Mr. Speaker, sir, so you can see what we have committed to helping the poor. and what the Democratic Labour Party committed to helping the poor, Mr. Speaker, sir. I keep hearing about crime, and I've recently been asked, sir, to lead the portfolio on crime prevention. I would want to begin first and foremost by thanking the member for the city for the work that he would have done, Mr. Speaker, sir, to help us try to address crime. And naturally, Mr. Speaker, sir, my good friend, the Attorney General, for the work that he did and continues to do to deal with the crime problem in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir. Tony Blair, the Honourable former Prime Minister of the UK, when he was canvassing, I think around 97, they had a mantra: tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. We have to do both, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm not going to get into this. I've now taken up this mandate and nobody ain't drawing me into nothing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition can't tell me what to do. Nobody is drawing me into anything. But I want the country to know that I will take my time, I will learn my portfolio, I will look at what was done before I came, Mr. Speaker, sir. I will work with the Honourable Attorney General, and I will work with the police of Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir, and with the people of this country. And that is all I will say. And I will speak on this, sir, when I feel equipped to be able to do so. And no Honourable Leader of the Opposition can tell me when I have to speak on crime, Mr. Speaker, sir. Suffice it to say that I will tell the people of Barbados that this Labour Party has done a lot to address both crime when it has already been committed and the causes of crime to prevent it from being committed, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, let us be clear. And I want to get to the budget very quickly, Mr. Speaker, sir. I listened to this budget, and of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, during the course of the last 2 years and the last year, this ministry has done a lot of work. I want to thank my public servants, sir, who would have done a lot of work to put this country in a position where we can say, not as a boast, but as a fact, that we have done the most for any government, sir, for persons with disabilities in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. That is a fact. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have put in place, Mr. Speaker, sir, a policy, and quickly thereafter we came with legislation. People should know by now that there's very little space for me between the time I announce the policy and the legislation that follows. Mr. Speaker, sir, and I will not go through all the things that we would have done, sir, but you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, during the last discussion, sir, we extended the categories where persons could get support from the National Insurance, sir. During the course of this debate, we clarified it because there were many people, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, I remember he called me one afternoon. There were 2 people in his office who had a child that did not fit into any of the categories that we had announced, the 4 categories. And the persons, like other people in this country, were concerned that they were left out from the support of a caring government, Mr. Speaker, sir. I had already spoken to the Prime Minister, sir, and had already spoken to the member for St. James North. And we knew that the Prime Minister's intention, we knew the policy the government was always meant to address persons who were unable to function. And I was able to articulate that on the phone for the Honourable Member, sir. And the relief that came to them, as conveyed to me from the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, sir, cannot be put in words, Mr. Speaker, sir. So we do not come here to pretend. These are real people with real lives, Mr. Speaker, sir, and real problems. I heard a few debates ago, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition said he did not come to comfort the disturbed. Listen to these debates. Barbadians need to listen to these debates. He stood there and said, I have not come to this place to comfort the disturbed. Well, this is what this Labour Party came to do. We came to comfort the disturbed, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, this Labour Party, as I move off of disabilities, and there's so much more than I could say. In relation to the elderly, Mr. Speaker, sir, people have been talking over and over about the things affecting elderly persons in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir. We articulated the policy. We followed it up with legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir. The estimates last year, we were given some financing to start building facilities at Sterling. Well, we chose Sterling. During these estimates, we identified a facility in St. Thomas, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we are going to build out facilities all over this country for the elderly, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have a policy where we believe aging in place is important, Mr. Speaker. On top of that, we assigned 420 persons during COVID, Mr. Speaker, sir, to stay with older persons so that they are not alone during COVID. And at the end of COVID, do you know how many we sent home, Mr. Speaker, sir? Not a single person was sent home by this administration, Mr. Speaker. Not a single person. And in many cases, Mr. Speaker, sir, now that we've done the review, sir, and I want to thank the Honourable Prime Minister again, because there's a certain leeway that again, I accept that. Mr. Speaker, sir, to be able to do things. And in our new social empowerment agency, we've asked for some additional staff to be able to better deliver goods and services to the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, on children. And I'm going through them quickly because I know I don't have a lot of time. But on children, so I've given you the elderly, and I've given you disability. Sir, on children, Mr. Speaker, sir. In this budget exercise, Mr. Speaker, we have outlined, first and foremost, I always smile when I get to these things, Mr. Speaker, because again, as a former manager of the Child Care Board, you know that we were struggling for a long time to get people to foster parents, to do foster care. We've been talking about it. I remember the former head, permit me to say, Ms. Crawford, sir, when she was director, asking time and time again for a raise in the fees, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have not raised the fees to allow parents who foster children to be able to afford certain things. I saw a man at night, he said to me, he said, Mr. Humphrey, I love the child that I foster. I would not give up this child for the world. My child. He referred to the child. This is my child. But the truth is, the $400 that I am getting a month is not enough. And I have to pull my pocket, and I don't mind pulling my pocket, but it is hard, Mr. Humphrey. In these estimates, we doubled the monies that are payable to foster parents, Mr. Speaker, sir. So that persons who step forward like that great gentleman can realize that this government cares about them, sir, and that the children who are in care, sir, know that we care about them. Also on the Child Care Board, Mr. Speaker, sir, which will be part of the Social Empowerment Agency. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, sir, that in the Child Protection Bill, now Act, we asked for a secure treatment facility for children. And that secure treatment facility was meant to be a place between what was formerly the punitive center at Dodds and the child care, because there's some children in care, as you know, as a social worker, there's some children in care that need extra attention. And the courts have been sending many children to the Child Care Board who need extra attention. But there's no facility. And this is not a new phenomenon, Mr. Speaker. This has been happening for a while. And that this year, we have secured a facility, Mr. Speaker, sir, that would allow us to treat to those children in a way that is dignified and humane, Mr. Speaker, sir. So while others are talking it, we are doing it on behalf of the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. On persons who visit the welfare department, the current welfare list is about 5,600 persons, Mr. Speaker, sir. When we came into office, one of the first things that we did very quietly was to raise the welfare grants by 40%, Mr. Speaker, sir. We raised the monies paid by welfare by 40%. We then extended and expanded the number of NGOs that deal with the ministry, sir, in terms of the support that we gave them by an additional 40%. During the course of these estimates, you will see, sir, that we asked for support to widen that so that we could support those agencies that are helping the poor, Mr. Speaker, sir. I've expressed in here during the last year's estimates and during this year's estimates, Mr. Speaker, sir, that I believe that we have to be able to offer support to those who offer goods and services to the poor. So the Alliance to End Homelessness, back on that. Mr. Speaker, sir, I explained, and this idea that it is a secret is only meant to be theater. When we agreed as a cabinet to do it, you know what the first thing we did? We had a press conference. We held a press conference and we announced that we are going to be giving the Alliance to End Homelessness $500,000 as part of a partnership with the government to be able to deliver to the homeless persons in town, because many said during the course of the day, there was no place to go. So we held a press conference and we announced it. During the estimates last year, I said that we were going to do it for a year. And at the end of the year, we were going to do an audit of the finances as well as the operations and how impactful it was. A financial year runs from April 1st to March 31st. April 1st, 2024 was the beginning of the financial year. The financial year ends on March 31st, 2025. The financial year has not yet ended. So when the opposition leader gets here and says, oh, you say you're going to do an audit, you do the audit, he needs to realize, and I'm pretty sure that this is genuine, and I mean this decently, sir, this is genuine ignorance, that a financial year runs from April 1st to March 31st. Therefore, the financial year has not yet ended, Mr. Speaker, sir. So why would I audit when the year hasn't ended, when we said we will audit at the end of the year? It is a common sense thing, Mr. Speaker. And we have put in these estimates $200,000 to do the audit, as we said we would do, Mr. Speaker, sir. So there is no deceit, Mr. Speaker, sir. We did not attempt to trick anybody, but I do know, again, that I will not be lectured by any government that did absolutely nothing for the homeless, Mr. Speaker, sir. And as I wrap up, Mr. Speaker, sir, very quickly on the monies that we were given to welfare, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because there is a view, every time I come in here, I have to hear the opposition leader shout over to me, he would give welfare more money. I would give the welfare department more money. I would give the welfare department, would you like more money? Well, every minister would like more money, of course. But what is it that we have been doing, Mr. Speaker, sir? So I went through the numbers, Mr. Speaker, and I will give you some, I won't give you all. In terms of national assistance, between the year ending 2018, Mr. Speaker, so this is what we came and found. $10 million was given on national assistance by the welfare department. By the end of 2022, and it is more now, we gave $22 million, Mr. Speaker, sir, an increase of 114%, Mr. Speaker, sir. In relation to private rents, because again, we have determined that people should not live on the streets. People are talking it, and we are doing it, Mr. Speaker, sir. In relation to private rents, between 2017 to 2018, the welfare department paid $604,000 in private rents. We have paid out $1,768,000, 192% increase, Mr. Speaker, sir, because we determined that people shouldn't have to be on the streets. Mr. Speaker, I will not give you all, but I will do the last one, Mr. Speaker, sir. We ended, Mr. Speaker, sir, in relation to checks for food. When we came in, it was approximately $2,130,000, Mr. Speaker, sir. Now we are doing $9 million, a 350% increase. So when you keep telling me about you would do more for the poor, do more for who? When you compare what we have done as a government for people who are before the welfare department to what the Democratic Labour Party did when it was in office, it is chalk and cheese, Mr. Speaker, sir. So on every single measure, when it comes to social policy and social programming, this Labour Party has performed a heck of a lot better than the Democratic Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I will close this way. I want to thank all of the members. Mr. Speaker, sir, I really want to tell the Honourable Member for Christchurch East how impressed I am with his presentation. Christchurch East Central, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East would like it to have been him. But I want to tell the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central how impressed I was with that presentation. In fact, all of Barbados was, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a party, I listened to it, a lot of good things for the people of Barbados. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition has discarded the whole thing. It is the worst budget. It was a nothing budget, all kinds of things, Mr. Speaker, sir. But you know, the most excited, watch the video. The most excited he was in here is when he said, I am not by myself. I have a party now. I have a party now. That's the only thing that excited him, you know. I have a party now. I have a party now. Listen. When the opposition leader came over and crossed the floor, he said, I am crossing the floor and I'm going to join. I am going to join. I am crossing. I am going to join. I want to be taken seriously. And if I am to be taken seriously, I have to join another party. I, you know, Rasta, but everything is I. I can join a party. We, Mr. Speaker, sir, we talk plural. We came to help the people of this country. We have helped the people of this country. We will continue to help the people of this country. We have delivered a budget, sir, that will uplift the country, help the country to grow, make it easy to do business, sir, and allow poor people to live in decency and in dignity, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I support wholeheartedly the budget that was presented, sir. And with those few words, sir, I thank you.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first wish to again thank the constituents of St. James North for giving me the opportunity to be their parliamentary representative over the last 12 years. And by extension, through the Barbados Labour Party, to have had this opportunity to contribute to national development. I wish to commend the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central for his maiden budgetary proposals and financial statements presentation in this Parliament, and to join with colleagues in praising him for the job that he did and for thanking him for being what has been agreed on both sides as being the workhorse in terms of the financials and economics of this government. The Honourable Member for Christchurch South, and as I've said before, I've never said it in this Parliament, I believe I know him certainly longer than anyone else in this Parliament. 50 years plus. We went to secondary school together, contemporaries directly in law faculty, law school, law profession. And really and truly, he did himself a disservice through his torturous speech of over 10 hours. If he had done the public a disservice, I mean, you expect that, but he did himself a disservice as well. Quite honestly, I didn't know until the Honourable Prime Minister said it, that each and every second of it was televised. I thought that it was cut after the 3.5 hours equivalent to the Honourable Presenter. So, you know, this is a man who is in absolute and total mental and psychological conflict with himself. And Barbados has to understand that, because he's always been like that. What the Prime Minister, Honourable Prime Minister, described near the end of her speech of 2 or 3 instances where he agreed with her on certain issues and then relented. I mean, that is how he has been, and your character doesn't change at age 67. Your characteristics basically are formed in the first 7 years of your life, and they don't change. But it's always been like that. His morning word and evening word have never collided with each other successfully. But I'm not just saying these words in a vacuum. Anybody who could have, for the 4th time, switched parties. I mean, he was a member of the Barbados Labour Party for 25 years in all. 3 years in the late 1980s until he was so cowardly that he could not really, even though he intended to contest the St. Michael North East nomination of the Barbados Labour Party, when he reached the gates and saw the support there for the person who is now Prime Minister of Barbados, he turned back at the gates. But that's true. And then those 3 years added to after 22 years before February last year, when he was a member of the Barbados Labour Party, and he was as firm as any of us in here in condemning the Democratic Labour Party. Why would never forget the platform we mounted in Top Rock, December 2016. It was when stories was flowing all about in Christchurch South, and is there live still on video? His condemnation of the then Prime Minister was harsher that night than anybody else's. He was as firm as any of us in that the Democratic Labour Party was in the midst of a lost decade, the worst thing to have confronted Barbados since the abolition of colonialism. But now, what is he? And he was full of praise of the Barbados Labour Party and the person of whom, at least publicly, whom is now Prime Minister, and accepted the slogan that we had, give me the vote and watchman, was party to all that we were doing in terms of winning the election in 2018 and going forward. This is a man who, when he last left the Democratic Labour Party after the 1999 election, he damn didn't know he had left. But that is in keeping with his personality. And going in St. John, as the Honourable Prime Minister referenced, that he might be looking around there, he can't run in St. John, but this is a man who used to cuss the Honourable David Thompson in life and death more than anybody else in the Barbados Labour Party. So how he can go and run in St. John now? So this is a man in absolute and total mental and psychological conflict with himself. When he wakes up in the morning, he does not know what we're turning up. Because you can't be switching political parties like that. And the Democratic Labour Party, my bet is after the next election, he gone from them again too. But I think keeping with the man's character. So really and truly, 10 hours plus to say what? To say what? Criticize everybody in here. But like I said, don't be worried, colleagues, because there's a man who cussed David Thompson, Right Excellent Errol Barrow, both in life and death. As I said, I know him for over half a century. So you take my word for it. But don't let me be sidetracked anymore by nonsense and someone who has no utility to the future of the politics of Barbados. You know, Roscoe Pound, Harvard University professor, spoke about laws made by Parliament as being social engineering, that the value and role of a Parliament is to change legislatively the social dynamics of the people that they represent and of the poor people, those most vulnerable in society. And that is what this budget has sought to do. The issue of, and the budget, of course, comes within the context of 3 3/4 years of successive economic growth. 3 3/4 years since mid-2021, since COVID, of successive economic growth in this country, with the economy growing by 4% last year. You compare this to the Democratic Labour Party, their last 13 years of office between 1991 and 1994, and then the last decade, 2008, 2018, they only had 1 year of growth in those 13 years. And if I recall, it was a 1% growth, bare minimum, no growth at all, growth that you couldn't see whatsoever. And this budget is made within the context, therefore, of economic growth of our country. And of course, the first thing, of course, people with disabilities. And when the Honourable Prime Minister stood almost exactly a year ago in this Parliament and gave for the first time benefits, extended them to persons with disabilities, and the first time since 1967, when only the blind, the deaf who couldn't speak got benefits. And arising out of the committee which I had the honor to chair, we made certain suggestions. They were put into effect. And the Honourable Leader of the Opposition comes here yesterday and today, 10.5 hours, and couldn't find 1 minute to speak in praise of the further transformations in the lives of persons with disabilities that this government is pursuing. And I say that because last year he began his reply by saying how he had received correspondence or a call from a parent of a person with autism as to why autism was not included now in the category to get benefits. And the Honourable Prime Minister was able immediately on a point of order to get up and tell him and the Parliament and the people of Barbados that I had already spoken to her, saying that that's an omission that we need to correct and that she was going to put it in, which she did. But these benefits came in on the 1st of October last year. And by the second week, mid-October, we realized, and I say who, the Most Honourable Kerry-Ann Eiffel, in fact, called me and said, but you know, Eddie Boiler, we omitted, or Parliament omitted now minors. And, you know, because before, as I said, blind, deaf, without speech used to get, and the Prime Minister now was giving everyone non-contributory pension to minors, the equivalent. And I said, you know, but we obviously, that slipped us because we thought naturally now by giving the minors of persons with autism, cerebral palsy, multiple, and cirrhosis and Down syndrome, that it would come in. So it was an omission. And when we pointed that out to the Honourable Member of Parliament for Christchurch, he said, Eddie, don't worry, we will cure it. And that has been done. And that's commendable. And not only done, but retroactive to the 1st of October 2024. But the Honourable Leader of the Opposition couldn't mention that in praise of the government. But then after all, Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, you will recall, St. Michael South, sorry, you would recall that when that member rose to speak in the debate on the national policy on disabilities, he said he knew very little about people with disabilities. It didn't cross his mind really and truly. He never really thought about them in any way of national development and policy. So it doesn't surprise me. The policy proposal that from the 1st of June this year that there will be a special needs grant extended to cover disabilities satisfying the amended regulations, and the amended regulations no doubt will be done in consultation with the stakeholders in the disabilities cause, the Council of the Disabled, etc., no doubt. And that is because, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch for St. Michael South in his speech just now referred, for instance, to the constituent of the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, whose children, 2 children, hadn't fitted into any of the main categories. So therefore, the need now to extend this, the category of disability to get benefits. And that is the proposal to come into effect 1st of June 2025. That's what a parliament is there for, social engineering, for the benefit of those who are among the most vulnerable in our country. The issue of foster parents, and this is a system and policy area that we have to push. Foster parents, it is something that is more done in the Northern Hemisphere than in Barbados, and therefore the proposal to increase the allowance of foster parents by what, 100% almost, to $200 now per week per child, effective April 2025, I think it is a tremendous initiative in terms of now being able to treat some of our children who may not have parents that are able or even willing to look after them properly. The ex gratia payment of $32, in fact a subsidy on the water bill of those in the northern part of Barbados, St. Lucie and St. Peter, who regrettably are still experiencing some discolored water, not through the fault of this administration. As the Honourable Member for St. Lucie said, this has been happening for a very long time, 2 decades. And this party, this government, has the resolution to solve it, to solve the issue. It can't be done overnight. Rome was not built overnight, but it will be done, and it's being done. But in the interim, those affected, their water bill will be subsidized by $32 a month. Fantastic concession. And I congratulate the Honourable Member for St. Peter and St. Lucie for their interventions with the Cabinet and with the administration in this new initiative. I have absolutely no problem in the 20% tax on these salty foods and salty, high content unhealthy foods. That is the truth. Because if 30% of children in Barbados are said to be obese, that isn't me saying that, that is statistics that have been brought out. 30 or 31% of every child in Barbados obese. And so many millions of dollars being spent every year on to try to treat non-communicable diseases, of which people of the vast majority color in this country anyway are prone to have. It is the obligation of a government to intervene to try and correct this in some form or fashion. And therefore the 20% tax on these unhealthy foods. And as a corollary to that, you're taking off the excise tax and, the VAT and the import duty on some healthy fruit. And the truth, we need to eat more fruit. So the pears and the oranges and the mandarins and the grapefruits and plums, I'm in total support of the removal of the import duty and VAT on those items to try and bring down the cost of them. The issue of grant of $300 in solidarity allowance to qualified persons, effectively everyone, those working, paying NIS, those persons on welfare, those persons getting disability benefits, recipients of special needs grant, a fantastic policy again. Now, the Honourable Member of Christchurch South could laugh at that, because for him $300 ain't the money if he's charging $140,000 a case. $300 is no money, but for $300, for a lot of people, $300 is a lot of money. 3 to a grant lease. Can't laugh at that. You're multiplying that by tens of thousands of people. This is the kind of intervention that other countries in CARICOM do. Guyana does it occasionally. They certainly give people with disabilities, I think it's $500 US a month too. Occasionally a country in CARICOM, you would hear gives an extra month's salary to public servants at Christmas. So this is what's wrong with this, that it is criticized by the Democratic Labour Party. It is an example of social engineering. The increase in the national minimum wage of 2% on the first day of next year is again money in people's pockets. And even before now, the next negotiations for salary increases of public servants, which will be for the, third time since 2018 when we came into office, decision taken to increase the national minimum wage by 2%. A national minimum wage that before 2020, you can't even remember when it was last set. Again, an example of social engineering for the benefit of those most vulnerable and needy. The issue of maternity and paternity leave is key. This was a promise made on page 27 of the Barbados Labour Party 2018 manifesto. And of course that manifesto is a document to the House, that we would increase the maternity leave from the 12 weeks, and it's been increased to 14 weeks, and to give paternity leave, well, fathers, men get children too, and only women. So the 3-week paternity leave, fantastic. And as the Honourable Prime Minister said, if it took a woman as head of government for that to come in, we thank and commend her and the cabinet, or the minister, the junior minister, Minister of State in Finance, for that initiative. And of course, the limitation in conditions, or the removal of conditions where the parties don't have to live together to get the benefits, is a recognition of the reality of Barbados, the truth. So I commend that as well as an initiative in social engineering. Outside of the main financial and budgetary proposals, the issue of educational transformation is key and is at the core of our future national development. The Honourable Prime Minister has seen it fit to create now a ministry by the nomenclature of educational transformation. And I support this initiative. You know, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and not for the first time, there's at least the second time he said it in this Parliament, is against the abolition of the common entrance. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South just described his 10-hour speech as an elitist speech, and I totally agree with that assessment. I am for the abolition of the common entrance examination, and I speak as an individual who attended one of the traditional elitist schools in Barbados. And from that perspective, I see the inequity, the inequality of the common entrance examination. It condemns too many people at age 11 as failures in the eyes of too many people in society. That's the perception, that is the truth. And most of those children who are age 11 are so stigmatized, come from working class families. That is the reality of the situation in Barbados. A few can get through. That is the truth. You could always point to examples who get through, but the majority do not. And it can't be a case that at age 11, a child is condemned or stigmatized as a failure, that his sibling may get into one of the traditional big name schools, the schools that they say with Latin mottos, but they don't, and therefore there's a differentiation in the treatment by the family or others against that child. That child growing up with some kind of complex. As I said, that is not so in each and every case, but it's so in too many cases. And a caring government has to redress that inequity and treat our children fairly. And the progress of having a common entrance examination still is that age now 16, 17, too many of our children leaving school, secondary school, without any certification, without any skills, and are expected now to face the adult world in that state. It can't go on anymore. Educational transformation must come. And it's a key component of this country. And I wish the Honourable Senator in the other place who now has the ministerial mandate for that all the best in this. It has taken us a bit too long, I must say, for this to come about. I remember the Honourable Prime Minister on our first anniversary of election victory in May 2019 in Carlisle Bay Car Park, speaking towards the abolition of this common entrance examination. I believe it is an idea that she had from the time she was Minister of Education, and I really look forward to this coming about. Educational transformation, change in curriculum, courses on anger management, conflict resolution, teamwork, that we teach some entrepreneurial studies from primary school. And I was happy to see one of the private sector and business leaders in Barbados saying that publicly on 2 weeks ago. When I said that, when I was an opposition member of parliament, that we should teach entrepreneurial studies in primary school, the then Minister of Education, a man with absolutely no vision, said that children should be pitching marbles and playing rounders, and I want tell them that they should be taught business studies. But that is a man who was symptomatic of an administration without any vision for the national development of this country. We are transforming this country in terms of social empowerment. And the bill which was brought last Friday and passed in this parliament, the Social Empowerment Agency Bill, is key to this here. Because our system of how we treat to the most vulnerable in terms of welfare and benefits has to be reformed to. It has to be less bureaucratic. It has to be made easier. And the bringing together of all the agencies under the ministry is key. And to be truthful, it can cut out some fraud too, because there are cases, as we all know, where some people, especially during COVID, were able to get benefits from 2 and 3 aspects of the ministry. The mitigation benefit and welfare and another one too. So this is also key to part of the transformation of the lives of Barbadians. Community parenting is a key aspect which we need to develop and cement going forward. And of course, the Ministry of Crime Prevention is now under the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, and we have to go more into the communities, take community parents to our communities. we perhaps need to consider, not perhaps, we do need to consider, in fact, giving community parenting before some of our young people get children.
Your Honourable Member has 2 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I look to expand on this topic. I have been invited to give the address at the annual general meeting of Parados later this month, at the end of this month, where I would expand on this, on my ideas on this issue. National service. This government has brought into effect many initiatives to give our young people skills, whether it's the National Transformation Initiative, whether it's construction, gateway, whether it's all the courses, whether it's the youth corps, but we may very well have to see how we expand this to get more people involved in these programs to develop skills and vocational training and at the national level. And I'm sure that the administration will look and work on that. And we have to expand, as I heard the Honourable Member of St. James South say, I think last week, we have to look at expanding the capacity for our vocational training facilities. Mr. Speaker, I have full confidence that this administration will be able to put in place all of these noble budgetary proposals which were revealed in this Parliament 2 days ago. And the people of this country can have confidence that this is an administration which cares about them and which will do its best to make a better life for the people of this country. I thank you, sir.
Honourable Member St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that we suspend today's sitting until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
The question that this Honourable Chamber be suspended until the 13th of March 2025 at 9 a.m. in the form.
Mr. Speaker,
Just a small...
speaking on the suspension.
Speaking on the suspension, just on a point of elucidation, I'm making the documents related to my travel a document of the House, and on reviewing them, there were 2 or 3 ones that were included that I never took. So therefore, the amount actually drops to just over 1.3 million. But the documents are there. The main one, of course, was when I was to be at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and I actually had COVID. But the records still show that, and we've made the adjustments, and the documents will now be a document of the House for all and sundry to see. They are not private. Thank you.
Speaker, I beg to move that we suspend today's sitting until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
The question that this Honourable Chamber be suspended until the 13th of March 2025 at 9 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands suspended until the 13th of March 2025 at 9 a.m. in the forenoon.